I'm out in the forest because we've got a baseball game going that rescheduled, and so I had to to be here. So I've been out there coaching. They're having a good game. You can see it's. I went into the forest to do this. So the game's down there.
So you're coaching two sports tonight at the same time?
Yeah. Well, I don't have to do very much. I'm not the head coach.
Oh, okay.
So I help out with warming up the next pitcher, and then I'll maybe be on first base telling them to go or stay, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's fun. And then this weekend I'll be coaching jumping down in North Carolina. There's a whole bunch of people that they've been wanting a canopy course there forever. It's been years. Finally, we get one happening there. So it's
I'm looking forward to you coming to DeLand.
I'm sure it'll happen before long. I'm gonna see if we can schedule something in the spring. I wonder. I mean, it's not too late to do something. Maybe even in May, before it gets too hot. I mean, I'll do it whenever, but it gets pretty warm down there in the summer. Huh?
Yeah, it does.
When I lived in Florida,
May, June's okay. July and August are the miserable months.
Yeah, exactly. When I lived in Florida, I'd take off and work up north in the summer. Go teach AFF in tandem and that kind of thing up in like Wisconsin or something.
Yeah, it's funny for our vacations we do the same thing. We always go north up. Like we're about to go up to this summer. We'll go up to Canada and go to Montreal and Quebec City, and just to get away from the heat.
Good, yeah, for sure. There's a lot of great drop zones. Of course, Julian is up there. He's at Nouvelle Air, which means new air, south of Montreal, in a town called Farnham. I worked there for a little while. Nice little drop zone.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at it yet, but I probably will bring my rig. I normally do take it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you're just Quebec area, that's going to be your best one. But there's also Parachute Montreal, and I'm trying to think of other ones that are like close enough. But if you get out to Burnaby, that's a little bit further west. Really nice drop zone. That's one of my favorites in the world, in north of Lake Erie.
Is there one close to Niagara as well? Because we're going to be there for a bit. And I feel like I heard someone talk about that.
That's Burnaby. There's I mean, there's on the American side, you've got Frontier and Rochester Skydivers, not too far from there. And but on the Canadian side, Burnaby, I'm teaching a course there in I think it's June.
Okay.
Early June we scheduled. I've taught a lot of courses there, and it's just another one of these really good vibes drop zones where they care a lot about everybody.
Yeah, that's cool.
They continue to nurture good skydiving even after you've got your license and everything. Continue to teach, and there's a lot of highly experienced jumpers, and I think that makes a big difference. I mean, there's certainly places where there's a lot of experienced jumpers, but they don't really share information so much. They just want to do their team training jumps and that kind of thing. That's kind of it's not ideal when you're 100 to 1,000 jumps. There's this like gap, like nobody wants to jump with me.
Yeah, I found I think the smaller to medium sized drop zones tend to be better for that jump range. I think like
most of them, yeah.
Yeah, Cleveland Skydiving Center was a good one. We went up there, and there's lots of great coaches.
Yeah. Cool. So, what did you guys want to talk about?
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you which one is your home DC? Where did you? What's the?
Well, I don't really have a home DZ now. I mean, I've got Chambersburg. I was one of my home drop zones for quite a while in Pennsylvania. Just in this region, Skydive Orange is another really good place that I enjoy. I mean, that one has changed so much over the years, where the vibe was like really, really good for years, but maybe a little too wild in the party department. Mm-hmm. And that has kind of died down a little. It's not so wild, and now it's mostly about good skydives. I like that one. And then they opened up a few others in this area that I haven't even been to. That over the past year or two, I guess 2 years, there's 2 drop zones that have opened. Mm-hmm. So the one in that's just across the Bay Bridge sounds exciting. They got a good plane just recently. They went from Cessna to twin Bonanza, which I don't like. The Pipers and Beechcraft, I just worry about these low wing piston engine twins. They crash a lot. Even King Airs, they require so much airspeed to stay in the air, and that means, of course, the exits are harder. It's harder to climb out. The exits tend to blow apart if you're not really, really good. But what concerns me the most about those kind of high-speed airplanes with a high stall speed is if it loses an engine on takeoff, that parachute's not going to do you any good. And I've lost friends to that. So I'm more of a kind of a high wing guy. with the exception of, I mean, I don't mind the PAC 750. It's an airplane that it looks like somebody sort of put it together in their backyard, but it flies slow.
It does. It has
Have
a
you
low
guys
door
jumped
though.
the PAC?
Yeah, in DeLand they have one. Yeah.
If you're tall, then you may not like the PAC so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. But it's a very good. It's a good jump ship. It's safe. I don't like them in a crosswind. I don't like them in turbulence. They kind of wiggle all around because they strip the weight down to make the airplane climb well. It's made very lightweight, and so they do kind of wiggle.
It always feels a little weird leaving in a track and jump on that. You're heading towards the wing. You feel like you're going to hit the wing. Of course you don't, but it looks like, because there's a low wing, like you said.
Oh, not necessarily. I dented Paul Fayer. I think it was Paul Fayer's airplane with my head. Because I was doing one of these head down exits. When I coach head down, I just sort of take them off by holding onto their main lift, right. Kind of traditional. And I get at the front of the door. They're kind of up close to me, and then I drop off backwards into the relative wind. Kind of do one of these. Yeah. And the guy that I was jumping with was just this big burly guy. And when he went, he really forced towards the nose of the plane, and he just dropped my head right into the flap. I hit the wing with my head, and doing it, I rocked my world. And I had a funny sort of tracer of light in my vision for a day or two, little concussion. So you just have to be aware of the risk. Every airplane has its own risks.
That's something
that are different. You just learn the specifics of it. They can all get you if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, on the Caravan that we use in Spaceland, I think the people sometimes they hit the tire when we're doing tracking jumps. The guy, the guy living on his back, hits the tire.
Yep. You can't. That's the one. Is when you're coming off with some explosive energy. Yeah, if there's anything there, it's not the only one. There's a bunch of planes that are even worse than that one in terms of the risk of hitting a landing gear. The Islander, which you don't see those in the U.S. very much, but the Islander is the worst. There's this the high wing with this like long landing gear that's coming down on both wings, and it's right in front of the door. People hit it all the time.
The Otter's nice. That has a nice big door. It doesn't really have any obstacles like that.
Safest jump ship in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's where we jumped this week, actually. I liked it.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. But I mean, as long as you're careful, and I like to, especially if I have never jumped that particular model before, I'll walk out to the plane before there's anything going on and just look for the snag hazards. You know what I mean? Where could I maybe catch a leg strap on that little bolt that's sticking up, or what what are the operation of the door? Sort of the specifics. How do you, tailgates, how do you operate that? I want to know all that stuff before I'm up there, before I'm at altitude and things sort of pick up speed. I like to just sort of sit in the door, before jump ops even begin if I can, or the night before. I just sit in the door, so look around, visualizing, climb out rear float, center, front float. What are the specifics of this one? And in a matter of just 5 minutes of sitting out there, you'll figure out what those risks are.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to avoid them. So it'd be quiet night tonight, huh? I just want to make sure nobody's trying to get in, but nope, nobody else.
So I asked you about your home DC because I still want to go and see you and fly with you and get some one-on-one coaching. I'm trying to figure out where to go. Yeah,
I just travel. That's basically my MO. Is that you could show up anywhere in the world and I might just happen to be there, but I have a schedule. So for whatever reason, my next 3 courses in a row, are going to be in North Carolina, different drop
Okay.
zones. So Triangle skydiving, and that's this weekend. And then the one after that is, I forgot. I want to say Coastal Carolinas, I think. And I also have there's the Big Way event with big formation skydiving, but I'm coaching the canopy flight aspect of it. Just observing their landings and giving them feedback. We're doing a course, like a 1-day course before it starts, and trying to help these folks that are, beyond that level where they're required to do a canopy course. They might have had their B license for 30 years. They don't need it, but they need it. You know what I mean? Nobody actually explained to them, for instance, why loosening the chest strap makes sense. A lot of them, nobody explained it to them, so they don't do it because they feel like it's more dangerous. How do you fly the parachute with your body? How do you fly a coordinated turn? What are the pros and cons to the different methods of turning, the different mechanics? Just nobody's told that story to them because they thought they knew. You know what I mean? They didn't go asking questions, and that's the danger of experience, is that you think that you know enough, and so you stop inquiring. You lose your beginner's mind. So I think it's really important to just go and do a canopy course every year, no matter who you are.
I agree. I think that's where you get hurt. There's no better place to spend money. I mean, I've heard people gripe about paying for them, but you're going to pay for all this free flight coaching. Why not pay for canopy coach? I don't get it.
Yeah, because free flight coaching is it's cool.
It's cool. Yeah, exactly. But landing without getting hurt is pretty cool too.
I think it's your number one priority. I mean, if you're really serious about the long term, goal of, like, I want to be an old skydiver that's still doing this stuff with the, skydivers over 80, 40 way. You got to land soft, and you got to know your parachute inside and out, so that you're able to handle those weird situations where you're landing off, where you hit the turbulence and the canopy turns, when you're in the downdraft. You take a collapse at 50 feet. There's no time to think. You have to have the instincts cultivated, through a deep understanding, and then actually doing situations, putting yourself in situations like behind another canopy when you're up at 4,000 feet, to deliberately expose yourself to instability and see how you react, and get a sense of how resilient your parachute is or isn't. To taking that collapse here. Is it the type of canopy that wants to turn? Is it the type that just sort of pops out? Is it the type that wants to collapse, have an asymmetric, and then recovers on its own, and then noses up and then dives? Very common. Actually, I've seen a few accidents as a result of the secondary collapse, and it's not talked about in the debriefs of the 4-way, the 8-way. It's not talked about after the cool track and jump.
Yeah,
they talk about the free fall.
I mean, if you ask me, I don't know what to do if I get a collapse on 50 feet. I mean, I have no idea what to do.
Well, I mean, number one is you try to center your parachute, right? And by center, I mean, make sure the roll axis is over your head. You stop any turn before it evolves. And of course, that's more than one option. But ultimately, I find, like, if you're hanging equally on each riser group and one side of the parachute goes away, it does this. So it causes a harness turn. But at the same time, that collapse causes a lot of drag on that side of the parachute as well. So it wants to go not only into a roll, but also surge forward to a low angle of attack where the canopy's in front of you and it drops really quick. And so you got to lean on the good side. That's the way I think of it is, if my right side goes away, it's natural to want to try to pump out the collapsed side, and that natural instinct will get you killed because it's going to cause the turn to go faster. So instead, you lean the other way pretty aggressively, rolling your hips into an opposing harness turn, and that alone will usually stop the turn and recover the wing. It may then dive, right? It's like if it's sort of held into this funny configuration that's rotating the yaw because of all the drag on one side, and the wing is trying to kind of it pulls back that side up and back. As soon as the wing recovers from this input, it wants to sort of surge for more airspeed. It's collecting it. And so you have to be ready to check that surge. When the canopy tries to go in front of you, you hit those brakes sharply and just put the wing back over your head. So initially you're centering with respect to roll and yaw, and then once it recovers, you're prepared to stop the pitch surge that's normal after the recovery happens. It's possible that if you take an asymmetric collapse like that and you give harness input, it may not be enough. And so you might have to come in with opposite toggle to hold the parachute on a heading, especially on parachutes that don't have a lot of harness power. In other words, like a rectangle, a canopy like a reserve or something like that. It really doesn't give a lot of harness turn. You lean into it, it barely rotates, which means that you don't have the power to stop a rotation that's caused by a deflation. So be prepared to use a steering toggle also, and do it enough, but not too much. You know what I mean? If it's the right side that goes, you initially want to have the instinct of your body leaning to the good side of the parachute, but then you oppose with the other toggle if necessary, but not so much that you actually cause it to rotate the other way, or worse yet, stall the part of the parachute, because you don't have much time at 50 to 100 feet. You need that thing to recover and start its recovery process. And just like with a stall recovery, you can't just let your hands up and let it go through its normal pitch oscillation. They call flight cycle. The pitch oscillation, the natural, it gets like extra airspeed, which causes it to level off, and then it slows down because the parachute now goes behind you from the flaring effect as a result of the high airspeed, making the canopy go back, and then it slows down, and then it wants to surge again, and then it wants to go through yet another one of those. And your job is to do the opposite of what the canopy's doing. So if the canopy wants to go in front of you, you go no. The canopy goes behind you, go yes. Hands up. So there's this kind of playing with the brakes deliberately to center the wing, and that's something you can practice. Up high, you just apply brakes in a flare, and then you make the canopy surge, and then deliberately try to dampen those oscillations. The sine wave, if you will. Everything is really a sine wave. The canopy, goes behind you in the initial flare. You come off, it dives, and you stop the thing aggressively, but at the same time, you're kind of doing this in opposition to what you're feeling. And I think it's a great idea to play with these pitch dampening motions we call active pitch control with your eyes closed. When you're up high, you scan for traffic, and then you play around with the amount of brakes to make that parachute settle out, sort of calm down sooner. And you do it by load factor, and also the middle ear will tell you kind of where the canopy is. But to be able to sense that, especially down low, is very important. You don't have time at 50 to 100 feet when you've taken a collapse to look up at your parachute and figure out what's wrong with it. You need the evidence based on what you see. So I'm seeing a lot of green. Okay, well, that's probably a symmetrical collapse of some kind, or a surge from getting behind the trees or something, the turbulence, the downdrafts. And if it's rotating to the right, I know it's the right side that went away. Bottom line is, I don't care what it looks like. If it's turning to the right, I have to do something that turns to the left, to stop it and hold its heading. And then as soon as it starts to fly straight again on its own, you'll notice as the recovery occurs, it makes a noise. The actual collapses are usually silent. The recoveries are loud. The wing will actually make this snapping noise, and you hear this rush of the fabrics are getting snapped, and the airflow getting back into the wing to pressurize everything. That makes a little sound. And it's also an indication that things haven't settled out yet, so you're going to have to do things actively to center yourself on the pitch axis once you've stopped the turn. But priority number one is stop the turn of the parachute. Get it under control. There's obviously some things that you can't plan for, that it's complicated situations, but most of the time you're only dealing with full frontal collapse, asymmetrical collapse, right, where it actually wants to turn, And then on occasion, you do sometimes see what starts looking like a full frontal, but just the center cell collapses. We call that a fortune cookie. It may not go all the way to a full fortune cookie where your end cell, but it's kind of sort of trying to. So whether it's a symmetrical full frontal or a symmetrical fortune cookie, it holds a heading and it wants to dive at the ground. And your job is to spike those brakes sharply, not all the way, just enough so that you feel the line tension come back. You feel the lift come back. That's going to be indicated by the weight increase. And when you spike those brakes, you're not only increasing the drag of the airfoil to keep it, sort of above your head and slightly behind, but you're also helping the situation by pinching the airfoil at the back, because anytime you pull the brakes down, you're reducing the volume of the back of the parachute, right? Aft of the C lines collapses as you pull down on those tail points. And when you squeeze the tail, you squirt the air inside the wing forward. And so if you've got that frontal fortune cookie, it pops out. If you got the full frontal where the A lines go down and sort of under the canopy, it'll just pop it right out.
I've never heard it explained that way. That makes sense though. When you're pulling out of the back, you force air forward. Yeah.
If you reduce the volume at the back, that air has to go somewhere.
Yeah. That
right?
makes sense.
You remember Boyle's law? P1 V1 equals P2 V2. Pressure and volume. Those are the two things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the relationship of pressure and volume is a constant. It's a fraction. It will always work out to be the same thing. It's just on one side of the equation, you might have a larger volume and a lower pressure. And on the other side of the equation, you might have a smaller volume, like a squeezed balloon, that will now have a higher pressure inside of it. But it's all trying to achieve a balance, a homeostasis. So all of this is about Boyle's law. And so you're the intelligence behind Boyle's law in this case. Yeah,
I was thinking, thinking about if I'm flying and I'm feeling that that it's collapsing. Well, my collapse was. I'm thinking about my collapse. That was 20, 30 feet. I mean, I don't remember having 1 second to do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember it pushed me to the side, and next thing I'm on the ground. So it was just not. So, but let's say if I was higher.
I'm not. I think you still might have been able to fix it with this knowledge and with this rehearsal, because you didn't have it in your head. You didn't have it queued up as a response like this is queued up. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
If you practice this stuff.
We lost your volume there, Brian.
Yep.
If you drill it, you will be blown away how quickly you can fix this stuff. I watched a dude on a Katana 107 do a 270 high-speed approach in pretty soon.
No, your audio is gone. We can't hear you.
Oh, I wonder why. Huh.
It's very muted, Brian. It sounds like maybe, I don't know, you're far away or
your battery is dying on your mic.
Looks
Hey,
good.
Todd, how many jumps do you have, Todd?
No, I just have to
just under 300. I think I hit like 295 this past week.
Okay, good.
I did a lot of that in the first year. Then with just COVID things slowing down and had a lot of stuff with the family. My daughter plays competitive travel soccer. It just seemed like the weekends I had available to jump, we had soccer. And so the second year I slowed down quite a bit, but I'm trying to get back into it more.
Okay, we're very close. I got 284, so
yeah,
right there.
So we know dangerous.
Huh?
We know just enough to be dangerous.
Well, I got 2 accidents already under my belt.
Fixed it.
There you go. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. So all I'm saying is that I witnessed one of the most perfect examples of how, even with a limited altitude, if you do the right thing, you can solve some pretty extreme problems. I mean, the guy came out of his hook turn just a little bit high, so he was at maybe 20 feet off the ground, not high at all. in level flight. So granted, that's kind of an unusual circumstance compared to yours because he was going so fast and he was horizontal to the ground. But during the slowdown phase of that, of course, now the canopy naturally wants to gently surge forward. It's not as aggressive as this kind of a surge, but after you level out, the canopy naturally want to go down the hill. And as it does, the line loading reduces, right? As it does, the lift reduces, particularly the lift at the front of the parachute. And at that point, he took an asymmetric collapse. He immediately responded with an opposing harness and toggle input, kept the canopy from turning. He kept himself pretty much on a heading because he was so quick about it. And as soon as he stopped the turn and the wing recovered all on its own because he stopped his turn, the wing wanted to dive. And as soon as it started to dive, it did a full frontal. He whacked those brakes so sharply the nose popped out. He flared as a result of that and then landed softly on his feet. He collapsed his parachute, put it away, and I walked up to him like this. I want to shake your hand because that was freaking amazing. And he said, "Oh yeah, you don't remember me. I didn't used to have the big bushy beard, but I took your canopy course a bunch of years ago, and I was thinking exactly what you taught me, and it worked."
That's awesome.
Even years later, it occurred to him to, number one, prioritize the heading, right? Stop the turn. Number two, be ready for that secondary surge and stop it from doing it. Even if the nose does go, you can still, put that parachute behind you where the nose wants to roll out and fly again. And it proof's in the pudding. It works.
So if, let's say if it's turning and then you apply, like I said, you apply just one brake kind of sharp, that's not going to, that's, what about rear riser? Isn't rear riser also?
Not as good. Yeah, no, it's not as good. Actually, harness is by far the best. Yeah. As your instinct, it has to be your body as the priority. The rear riser front riser would be the worst thing you could do.
Sure.
Second worst would be a rear riser because it doesn't offer as much drag as a toggle does, right? So, in other words, if you pull down on a rear riser, you're not actually creating an edge to the back of the parachute to offer all that drag, and so it may not stop the turn quite as quickly, quite as well. Mm-hmm. And the third thing is that when you lean with your harness onto the good side, there is a roll axis manipulation happening that is very, very helpful. And picture those cross ports, right? The holes in your ribs. You've lost part of your parachute. It's folded under. It doesn't have the relative wind to, inhale from the leading edge of the wingtip. And so the only way you can get the air to that side of the wing is, number one, to increase the angle of attack. That can work. But you're going against a lot of relative wind force. And so a flare can help if you stop the turn, because if the turn itself is sliding you sideways into the collapse, you're going down the toilet bowl. So you're a turd getting flushed down the spiral, and the relative wind is coming from the side of your wing, holding it shut. But those cross ports work in your favor here, because if you lean aggressively to the other side of the parachute, the air rolls inside the wing, inside the volume, from the good side over to the bad side, and it just pops out.
Brian, when you say crossport, you're talking about inside the wing, the holes between the...
Yes.
Okay.
All the holes in the ribs are
the ribs,
primarily, they're primarily for this.
Okay.
I remember years ago, I was at the PIA symposium checking out the new canopies, looking at the competition, and I went to the Parachute de France booth, and they had come out with something that year called the Springo. It was an elliptical canopy, and I talked to the designer of it. I said, "Michelle, I noticed inside the wing you've got no cross ports at all." And I hadn't seen a wing without cross ports since the 70s. When we cross-ported them manually with a chock full of nuts coffee can, you cut the top and the bottom off, you stick it inside there and then you'd hot knife. We all did that because we had to. And he said, "Well, it is not necessary because this is an elliptical wing, so the opening and the balance pressure is not the problem." And he gave me all these excuses, and I said, "All right, we'll see how it goes." Then 2 years later, at the next symposium, I looked inside of the Springo too, and I said, Michelle, I noticed you have the cross support. It's like, he didn't say anything. He just went like this, you know, his way of saying, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's very smart. And if you look at paragliders, those ribs are Swiss cheese. You look at speed wings, big holes. Honestly, the only reason why we don't have larger cross ports in our skydiving wings, well, my belief is that because we're so worried about them blowing up.
Yeah.
But if we do reduce the structure inside those ribs with the opening shock forces, we could shred ribs. I still think we could probably do more. And I've tested. I did one of the quad pack, I called it, with 4 holes in each location, so I could have more flow area, but I wouldn't have the distortion, and I would still have structure, right? Because if you have 4 holes, you've got structure here and here down the middle. It worked great. They didn't blow up. They opened great. It was actually a CRW design initially for a nice quick opening canopy, and then I did it in my base jumping parachute, and it worked very well. Whereas the Icarus guys went with that oval shaped one that PD always used. I mean, they copied it from Paraflight, and before them they copied it from somebody else. But the oval shape, you're limited in the area, and if you make that oval shape too big, you get a bubble in the airflow, a little distortion.
Mm-hmm.
And you also get damage, like it slices sometimes, where you actually get a cut that goes all the way to the skins. And so they put 2 next to it that are smaller, same oval shape, just on either side of that bigger one, and that seems to have increased flow area with minimizing distortion as well. So I think that was a smart move that Gyro made. Cross ports are your friend. It's just they get afraid and they get nasty, and you should look inside your parachute every once in a while and make sure they don't have damage that's spreading. Even if it's hot knifed, laser cut, it still can and will fray eventually.
Yeah, that's something I need to do. I look at my rig a lot, but I don't look at the canopy a bunch.
Hanging up.
Yeah.
You're hanging up from the tail, and you lift up in one chamber at a time, not one cylinder, one chamber at a time. And you stick your head inside the parachute and you climb around in there and look at everything. That's the only way to really know what's going on. And I promise you, most riggers don't do that at your repack cycle. You'll be lucky if they even check to see if the 3-ring works, by cutting it away and putting it back on. I do, but most of them don't. They'll pull your pin. They'll put your main up at an angle a little bit. They'll move the riser covers, open and move the risers out of the way so they can pack the reserve. And then they just close up the main after. So they didn't check your trim. They didn't check if there's any fraying or damage on the tail points where the brakes attach. And, the slider stops on the end cells, on the wing.
You're scaring me, Brian. I'm going to have to send my rig repacks.
No, better yet, much better yet. I don't want everybody to rely on me. I want you to know what to look for.
Yeah. Well, I've got your videos where you go over some of that, but I need to actually watch it while I have my rig out, my canopy out. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a good way to go. The main parachute inspection video is gold. It's like, I wish that all riggers would just watch that. Just watch the video. So these areas where parachutes get damaged for so many years. I was the guy, man. If something broke at my parachute manufacturer, I was working for Tony. If something busted, I was the one that fixed it. And so I got to see where they, it's like, oh, it's this one again. It's the bridle attachment. And that helped me to understand where the stresses are, but it also helped me to reinforce parachutes better in those areas where it's more likely to have damage. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to think about for sure. But it's, like I say, it's even with these really complicated things, it's not an infinite volume of information. It's limited. It's just a matter of just starting at the beginning and go, all right, well, what do I need to look for? Okay, the lines, they can break. So let's, where do they break? What are the locations where it gets the most damage? The slider wear, the people that leave their slider up, especially the ones that don't even collapse it. And it's just vibrating the whole time on the lower part of their suspension lines. Yeah, it's going to break. Sure. You're eating away your line. There's more advantages to collapsing your slider and pulling it down than just looking pretty as you're landing. That's definitely one of them.
Yeah, I'm not in the habit of pulling it down. I mean, of course I collapse it, but I leave it up there, so I don't pull it down. I
I,
need to start doing that.
I think that you will really like it. At
Yeah.
first, it'll seem like this annoying additional task, like one more thing to do after opening. What a pain in the ass. And then you'll see that by flying wider, right? That's what happens. You pull the slider all the way down, and the connector links move further apart. Right? The three rings move further apart. Everything now flies from your hips instead of from the slider, right? Where now the risers, if the slider's above your risers are almost parallel,
Yeah.
And so that means that you hit a toggle, canopy goes, and then you go later. You're independent from the parachute. Whereas if you get the slider all the way down and everything widens out, now it's flying from your hips as the attachment point almost. And so being inside the triangle, you're less likely to induce line twists from a collapse, from aggressive toggle maneuvering, really aggressive, like whack, and then the other way. You're far less likely to get a line twist from a stall recovery that doesn't go well, where you're sort of panicked, or you hold that stall a little bit too long and the canopy starts to go into a bit of a turn and you let it up super aggressively and it already had a little rotational energy. Yeah, that wants the line twist. But with it wide, you also, I think, you have more access to manipulating things too. Right? So you can grab risers and stop line twists, right? By pushing and pulling. Push forward on one and pull the other one. And so you just grab them. So even in flight, you can stop line twists from happening or deliberately spin yourself around backwards, which is fun to do, right? Where you actually turn around and look behind you, do a 180-degree turn in your risers. This is totally doable well above cutaway altitude. You shouldn't do it in the pattern.
Right, you have little slider stops, right, that you sew into the risers. You don't have the elastic or Velcro or magnet piece behind it, right?
On some of my rigs, I have a magnet in addition to the slider locks that lock the slider down on the risers themselves. But I have all on the sliders that I pull down. Mostly, I have both. Mostly.
Yeah, because I do it sometimes.
And of course, the removable.
The
small parachutes, I've got the removable.
Yeah, I do it sometimes. It's just at times it's hard to grab that slider keeper, right? At least for me, sometimes.
Right.
So I don't want to spend like 10 seconds or 20 seconds trying to grab it if it's pointed down or whatever.
That's what these are for.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. If
just
good enough, I might actually try those.
Yep. Yeah, there's a diagram. I think it's on my old Big Air Sports site, but maybe I should consider sharing it. Maybe I already did on the Mighty Network.
I know you've talked about it on here. I don't know if I've seen, but yeah, I've heard you talk about it. I think you showed it on one of your rigs.
Well, if you go to bigairsports.com, sports with a Z at the end, it's an old website design. You'll kind of giggle at it, but if you go to the articles page down to rigging, and you'll see that there's diagrams, and instructions, dimensions. So you can just pass it on to
Big Air Sports.
Big Air Sports, SPORTZ.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I see.
I need to update that one. Oh, geez, that reminds me. Okay. More things that I got to do before tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and you say where parachute design? Or?
If you go to, I think it's like rigging or parachute. Just go to the articles page, not parachute designs, but articles.
Oh, okay, articles. I see.
And is it just Spectra cord you use to sew on there, or what is it?
No, I don't use Spectra. I use Dacron.
Okay.
I've used as big as 1,000 pound or as small as 500. That seemed to work actually. I think that they're probably 600 or 700 pound Dacron brake line basically is fine. And I'll just you finger trap it back inside of itself so it's double thickness. And then I'll just hit it with you can do it with a zigzag machine, but I prefer a bar tacker because it's a little tighter stitch.
Yeah, I think I might have, Pablito down in DeLand. I think I might have, I'm sure he could, I might ask him for my next free pack cycle to do that because I really dislike trying to reach back and grab the slider keeper. Yep,
I get it. Yeah, depending on the rig, some of them really want to hide on you. Hard to find it. And it could be just the fit of your rig.
I think that's a piece of it too. Yeah, I measure myself. It was kind of like during COVID. I couldn't go into UPT and have them measure me, so it's probably just a little bit off anyway. But yeah,
could be.
Yeah,
and
I need to add that to my rate. Yeah.
I think you'll like it. It's very simple. You don't have to deal with the complexity of the magnet. I don't mind the magnet, and I find it does hold the slider down a little bit better than these do. This will sit just a little bit higher, but I'm okay with it either way. I'm happy.
I mean, so the only concern with the magnet is just reaching it. I mean, that's all? I mean,
Yeah, just finding it because it might flip and be hard to reach.
Yeah, mine will tend to be pointed down, and I'm probably not as flexible as I should be. So it's just literally hard for me to reach back and grab it sometimes. Whereas with this, if I understand it correctly, you just slide
Sure.
it down. I mean, there's really no reaching back.
Yeah, you just pull your front grommets, your front riser grommets. Just pull it past past that little thing, and it just locks.
Yeah,
it's
I think I'm gonna try that.
The parachutes just prefer to fly wide, you know. And then we talk about milking your glide ratio on rear risers. If you pull the rear risers down to, let's say, that 60 to 70%, that is the optimum glide ratio on a no wind day. Obviously, this is a more complicated issue when there's winds and crab angles and stuff, but that's the optimum for no wind. But also, you can enhance that glide by spreading the risers as you load them. Because if you spread those rear risers and load them up, then the wing flattens. So you actually, your lift at the wingtip is produced more in opposition to your weight.
Easier to do the sliders all the way down. Yeah.
It doesn't work if the slider's above your hands.
Yeah.
You can't push out and have any effect on the shape of the parachute.
So that is
yet another reason. Yeah.
I mean, probably the first time I hear it saying just open the rear riser. So I guess, for example, if I'm coming from a long spot without actually, pulling down the rear riser, but just open them up, that's going to help me a little bit to cover more ground, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by pushing out on those rear riser connector links, you are shortening the distance to the canopy. So it is pulling down just by pushing out, but it's also doing that flattening thing as well.
Yeah.
And we may find that the optimum glide is all the way out and then down a little. Probably. You probably will have to pull down just a little bit. And what I do when I'm doing like a long glide, where I've got several minutes, of gliding a long way, I'll turn my shoulders around. So instead of doing this, where it's a lot of work, I'll actually lean all the way forward, rotate my shoulder joint around like this, and I can do that all day. It's not as hard physically for me. This is a chin up.
Yeah.
If somebody's got major shoulder problems, an old surgery or a surgery that they need to have, don't do that. but yeah, it's I've never been injured by doing that, and it does seem to allow for a longer, prolonged change to the canopy.
Yeah, interesting. We have a guy in our drop zone. Like every drop zone, you have the wingsuiters and you have the angle jumpers and free flyers and all that. There's one guy, he's deep into flocking.
Mm-hmm.
and he's been on probably 7 camps, and he's lobbying to each of us for flocking. And I did 2 jumps with the guy, and it's very interesting. I mean, because he's flying. Yeah, he's flying. I mean, I don't know, probably a 99. I don't know, a small canopy compared with mine. Mm-hmm. But all his, his explanation, and then we went to his house with videos. I mean, he was he's really pushing flocking in our drop zone, and just teaching us to fly all together on different size canopies. So he's I talked to him before today, and he was like, hey, if you follow me in flocking, you will be a much better pilot for sure.
It's very, very true. Yeah, you have to keep thinking about how am I going to get there? He's over here. Well, there might be just simply a matter of steering with your toggles, but it could be body position changes. It could be switching from fronts into the rears and then back to the brakes. You maybe sashay a little bit, or maybe there's so many options, and you start to stop thinking and more just feeling and reacting.
Yeah, he was. I remember one of the jumps we did. He was talking about, I guess inputs that I didn't think about before. Like he told me, hey, when you're flying, just extend your legs, put your legs in front of you, and that will change how you're flying without doing anything else. Just lift up your legs and keep them there. And I was like, that. I mean, like that's an input that I didn't realize it was useful for something, right?
Absolutely.
Is that
Absolutely.
to drag? What's the theory behind that? I guess.
Yep, the reducing drag. I mean, if you put your legs together and lift them above the relative wind line, you actually can produce a little bit of body lift.
Yeah.
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 But you're reducing drag, but you're not affecting the shape of the wing. I mean, you're still, you're still flying the same level that the other guy. So if you want to slow down without any toggle or rear riser input, you can do that.
Yep. You can get big. You can flatten, get big and dive. Get small and level just with body position.
Yeah. You see some of the flockers, they're flying, they're like a star. They're opening they're opening their legs and their entire body just because they need to slow down because they're coming
to steepen. Because getting big under canopy, I don't find it actually slows down as much as it steepens your flight path by pulling back on the body. And if you watch, like most of the time when you see people flying canopies with wingsuiters, right, XRW, you've got the guy in a tiny canopy, probably with some weight on, but he's also in this big body posture to hold the canopy into a steeper glide ratio so they can match with the wingsuiter.
Yeah. So what I kind of understood about everything he was explaining me was we have all these, I don't know, I'm going to put a number to 12 inputs that we know, right? Front risers, rear risers, toggles, and all that, which that is going to affect the flying. But there's another set of inputs that are very minor, like the legs, like all this, which with a small input with a small results.
Yep.
Which that's going to help when you're flying with a lot of people on groups because you don't want to have big movement. It's very, very, very small. And that kind of like opened my mind to a series of movements that I just didn't know that I still don't know.
Yep. Well, the nice thing is you're opening high. You got all this time.
Yeah.
So you try stuff and then you see what the result is, and immediately you become your understanding becomes more elaborate. It's not just pulling on strings. It's more, it's flying. Yeah, I love it.
I think that would be great to do one. I haven't seen it much in my drop zone, but I believe, I don't know if it's Z Hills or Sebastian.
Yeah.
I know there's a group that does it. I want to say it's Z Hills. I'm sure there's people that do it, but I just haven't really seen it that much in Gland.
Yeah. That's there, but all you need is one person.
Yeah. Well, you're right. One
relative reference.
Yeah, I don't need 15.
No, as a matter of fact, you're going to learn more with a smaller formation in most ways. Not every way. Obviously, there's a specific knowledge base that is required for doing larger stuff. But you can change things more with a smaller formation, just like free flying. You go out with a whole bunch of people. What are you going to do? You're going to build the equivalent of a big, flat formation. Just you're in vertical attitude, and you don't have people moving around too much. So how much are they really learning by holding their slot the whole time? So I do like to do these 2 ways where we manipulate glide or we manipulate speed, but we also manipulate heading deliberately. We do over-unders, that kind of thing, or you move around the back and then over the other side, 180-degree turns in formation. That's one of my favorite things to do. And if you don't do it right, it's going to be unpleasant. So if you're both planning on doing a 180 and one of you does a 190, you either have separation or you have the opposite, And so it's about noticing, where are we going with this flock? And now we're going to make this change, let's say 90 degrees to the right. If you look over to the right and you think about where are we going to be going in a moment, before you make the turn, and then you go to that heading. But if it's like, I'm looking at you and I'm turning, I might meander to 110 degrees without even realizing, and then he's chasing me all over the place. So that's another level of air awareness beyond just, you're just getting used to being near somebody, and now you got to think about this bigger picture of what is my heading.
Yeah, one thing that I found kind of intimidating when looking at his videos, where they do all the flocking and everything. So when they're coming, to the pattern, they're going one behind the other one. We're talking about 10 guys. So when they're coming and when they're in final, that's when they spread, like they separate from each other, very close, like close to the ground. Like I when I watched the video, I was like, I'm not comfortable doing that. I'm too close to the ground, too close to my neighbor. I don't know, but I don't know. I mean, like that's why he goes to camps. I mean, that's it's a kind of a controlled environment to do all these type of things.
Sure.
Right?
Well, that's what you're doing up there, right? If you can fly next to somebody end cell to end cell and you don't feel turbulence, you're not taking collapses, nothing bad is happening. Well, there's no reason why you can't also do that on final. Just you have to know where to go. Directly behind somebody is not a good idea in general. But if you explore where that turbulence zone is when you're up high, then you're going to have a better sense of what you can and can't do. And of course, that turbulence area will change in angle and direction, and even magnitude, based on the airspeed, based on the angle of attack, and the glide ratio that the canopy is flying. So basically, it comes off of the body and the canopy directly behind relative to where it's traveling. But when you increase the angle of attack, you're now spoiling more sky. You're creating larger wingtip vortexes because you're at the high angle of attack, like a flare. So you have to kind of be aware of, it's like having a more of an imagination, for something that you can't see, but you can visualize. Where is that dirty zone and where can I be? And if I do hit it, what am I going to do? I'm not going to seize up and panic. I'm going to keep flying my canopy. I'm going to stop any turns before anything else. And then I'm going to think about maybe nosing the wing up after that turn is stopped, if there is a turn. It's not that complicated. It really isn't. You just got to do it, to discover that it's not that bad.
I think one of the signs that I missed when my canopy collapsed was when I was coming down to final, I don't know, 40 feet. I was flying, I was going east, and then at one moment I got pushed south, right? So so it wasn't a turn; it was like I got pushed south,
which says that the wind itself changed direction, probably.
Yeah, right. So it was perpendicular to my direction. Yeah. So and then I think, I need to correct it. So then I can't even remember what I did. I probably just put a toggle and corrected, and then. I don't know. A few seconds later, it collapsed, and I think I probably missed that signal. I think when my parachute moved sideways, I should be more like, okay, I need to be more prepared because more is coming.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. The change of direction of wind can cause things, but it also causes people to do inputs that cause things. So most of the time when I see canopy collapses, it's right after a toggle turn. What happens when you do a toggle turn, right? Especially if you're not, twisting your body into that turn, creating roll axis change with harness, you're also you're adding drag to one side of the parachute, and then it's sort of flaring the canopy a little bit as it twists on the yaw axis. And then when you let off that toggle, the canopy surges to a lower angle of attack. And as it does it actually rotates on the yaw axis also. So the action of doing a toggle turn as a response to, let's say, a side slide, I think was the beginning of the problem. The side slide itself, if you had sort of gone with it and just accepted the crosswind landing, it probably wouldn't have happened. But because you responded the way most people would, with the toggles, because of the programming, that this is how we steer. Instead of thinking, this is how we can steer, a bit of both, but more harness than toggle in that case as your response. Then you're not dealing with this rotating surge. That makes sense. I come up on the toggle and it does a yaw rotating surge, and now the canopy is at a low angle of attack, flying in an uncoordinated way where it's presenting a wingtip to the relative wind, and it wants to go away. And so now the instincts have to be cultivated. Even your visualizations, when you're just sort of picturing coming in on final, if you have to make a response to a crosswind, you do it primarily with your ass, and you don't have so many problems.
Yeah, and also
that's why these canopy courses are so good, Brian. I mean, because I find myself on final It's kind of your voice in my head almost every time, thinking about what to be prepared for, right? And exactly what you just said. You turn with your hips. You're not doing big toggle turns, but
Yep.
you have to rehearse and you have to think about it.
You do?
I don't think what would Jesus do, but what would Brian do? If I'm in my pattern, what would Brian do?
Well,
What would Brian do?
and what I'm thinking about when I'm flying is what does the parachute want me to do? You know, because you can boss your horse around, but you can have a very angry horse. So it's about what the wing's natural power is. You know, you try to steer with the lift. That's what harness is all about. You point the lift where you want to go, and it pulls you that way instead of jerking the thing around in the toggles. That's being bossy. Toggles are just too damn bossy.
Yeah. The more I think about. The more I think about, I mean, like I always do my pattern with toggle turns, but it seems like doing a harness rear riser turn, it will be the first option. I guess there could be a situation where a toggle turn, it's it makes sense for some reason, but it seems like a rear riser harness turn it's better for patterns.
Yep, it's more coordinated. It develops airspeed through the turn in a nice kind of balanced manner. Toggles offer too much drag, right? So it slows you down in the pattern. It causes it to flare a little bit in that maneuver. I mean, obviously, if you're super gentle about a toggle turn, you can, especially sort of the coaxing kind of a turn, or very, very gentle. You can fly a coordinated turn without your harness. You can, but it takes a long time. So if you want to turn now. Right, because you're on a downwind leg and you're going faster than you thought, and you're about to pass the line where you wanted to be for your base leg. You got to, get into it quick. And a harness rear riser turn will achieve that goal. Just remember that you got two rear risers. So when you're flying the pattern with rears, you really need to be ready to do harness rear and then both rears once in a while to flatten you out if you need to. If it's too steep, if it's causing you to maybe come up short of your target, you can flatten things out. There's a lot of corrections that can happen with just a little bit of load on the rears, just a little bit, and then you gently release it back up. And at the same time, you're also ready if you're flying that pattern and suddenly you hit some turbulence from the canopy in front of you or the rotor off the hanger. You're ready to drop those rears, to get off of them and spike the brakes, and you practice that. And if you know for a fact that it's really, really turbulent, I don't think it's such a good idea to do your pattern on rear risers with your hands up on the slinks where you've got tons of slack, right? So if I'm going from flying like this to needing to slap my brakes down to stop a collapse, I've got a long motion. It's a big, big motion because I'm up here. Whereas if I grab a little lower on the rears, I can do all the same stuff, but my brakes have just, less slack or even no slack at all. They're under tension a little bit. And then I can immediately increase the lift of my parachute.
But you're talking about grabbing lower. We're not talking about pulling lower.
No, I'm talking about grabbing the rear riser at a lower location so that you've taken up the slack a little bit on the rears. So just play around with it. Just what does it feel like when you do rear riser flares when you're like that, or versus a little bit deeper? It's a little harder to pull the rears when you're holding a little lower, but you've got this other advantage of sort of being ready to hit the brakes. Yeah, so I got my nephew is over there calling me over. I think the game's over. It sounds like I got to drive these guys home.
That's good. No problem.
That was a good session. Good talk.
Yeah. It's always good. It's always good. I got you guys on a tripod, so I figured I might not be prepared for a forest session. It's the first game I've missed in a while, but I'm glad at least I got to coach for the first several innings and help them warm up some pitchers who did a great job.
Don't miss out on stuff with your kids. So let us know. We can always switch it up.
Yeah, I know. But this worked out just fine. there's tons of other parents that do this. It's not like I'm getting paid, you know.
All the parents asking, what's that YouTuber doing in the woods?
Yeah, exactly.
I saw some
Yeah,
guys walking behind you in the woods at one point, kind of looking at
Did you
you.
Yeah,
notice
me
that?
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
noticed
I
that
saw.
too.
I was going to warn you. I was like, they're coming towards you.
Yep.
All right,
right.
talk to you guys
Well,
next week.
Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
have fun. Thanks for coming.
Yep, take care.
Bye.
All right, see you. Bye bye.